We're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, it is Jobs Day. We got the big jobs report, and employment, it's at the core of this recovery, Carol, to say the least. Irina Novoselsky is back with us, the CEO of CareerBuilder. She joins us on the phone from New York. So, Irina, when you look at, let's just start with the data and then expand from there. When you look at a number like this, you see what the administration has to say, you see what various analysts and economists have to say. How does it jive with what you're seeing in your business?
So we're seeing some positive momentum. When you look at the results, they are the lowest jobless claim numbers that we have since the start of this pandemic. It's been the lowest unemployment rate since we started. On our site, we're seeing consistent domestic job posting growth almost in every state, not everyone yet, but we're seeing about 65% increase just in the past 2 months on the job posting side. However, there's some also really conflicting and divisive data that's coming out, and it's really around the inequality of the unemployment numbers. If you look at some of the percents, they're continuing to really highlight how Black Americans are at the highest unemployment rate at 14.6% compared to white Americans at 9%.
How different is that arena pre-COVID?
Well, you know what's different? There was always a gap, but one of the things that is interesting to see is that the change month over month is not as big as you would expect it to be. So, for example, the unemployment rate for Black Americans has only improved 5% compared to white Americans. It improved almost 10%. And even within male and female gender differences, we're seeing that women are improving about 6% and men are improving about 8%. So the gap that is more expansive on the race side than it is really on the gender side.
And so when you think about sectors as well, I mean, the headlines are bleak, Irina, at least at first glance, but you obviously have data that is far more sophisticated than us reading the headlines or just talking to people. I'm about to take a vacation happily, but getting on a plane for the first time, but I don't expect to see a whole lot of people, and we know that travel and leisure, hospitality overall, so much of that, I mean, those industries have just been crushed in many ways. Media, we work in it. We know, our colleagues at other organizations are suffering here. Help us understand how that fits in with some of the patterns you're seeing industry by industry.
The ones that you mentioned, we're seeing across the board as well. The COVID hard-hit industries are continuing to still slowly really feel the impacts of COVID. However, a lot of those employees that were impacted by some of those layoffs, one of the things that we are seeing is they have a lot of transferable skills. They might have not done the job of what their skills can allow them to do, but by pivoting and really looking for work based on their skill set, they're actually a great match. For example, flight attendants, hospitality workers, they're over a 95% match for customer service representative roles. And that customer service space right now is growing and looking for talent as the e-commerce community as so much moves into online and those parts of our domestic growth are flourishing. But we did see a little bit more movement. One of the things that was interesting to see is caretakers, both animal, at home aides are continuing to grow in this past month versus the previous month, which is a nice change. Tutors, preschool teachers, real estate agents. And one of the ones that was interesting that, we looked at was actually taxi drivers, which we really haven't seen in the last few months for very obvious reasons. And also the healthcare system that you talk about, that there's so much demand in the healthcare system, but they've actually suffered more than even some of the other industries because elective procedures were stalled. And so now, as state by state, they're bringing that back. We're slowly starting to see job growth in postings in the healthcare space as well.
Are you nervous, though? I mean, I think we're concerned that it's not going to be a straight line to recovery when it comes certainly to the labor market and also, of course, the economy. A lot of it's contingent. We're watching very closely on more relief coming out of Washington to help out individuals, to help out small businesses, to continue to provide some assistance. Are you worried, though, that you talked about a 65% increase in job postings, that you're not going to maybe continue to see that kind of growth and that you might even see some downturns again?
Yeah, we're seeing it state by state. It's pretty representative of as cases go up in states or as states are relooking at some of their preventative measures. That if you look across all of our states, not every single one of them is growing in job postings. We have highs of Indiana last week alone that grew 15% in their postings, and then we have lows of Missouri that declined 9%. And so we're definitely seeing some of what you're talking about, both on the job category, but also even more clearly geographically, given the pandemic is different in each and every state.
Interesting. And so does this, having watched like seasonal patterns and things like that, do things like that sort of go out the window at this point, Irina, just because of the world that we're living in to some extent, because we're in a pandemic, because we've been in this sort of recession teetering on depression, or did those sorts of patterns hold? And I'm thinking especially as we look to the holiday season, which is not too far away, or back to school, both of which are going to be really different.
Yeah, and we're very adaptive as human beings, and
Yeah.
we're seeing some of that adaptness taking place in the form of the employment market. And one of the things you just touched on, but we work with majority of the staffing companies, and they're seeing a big increase in temporary labor, where some companies are just not ready to make that full-time commitment, but they do need help, and so they're seeing the growth really for 2 months consecutively now of temporary labor going up. We're also seeing, one of the things we've talked about, but our lives are moving much more virtual, from shopping to entertainment to what, minimal entertainment we can get. And that really is causing a huge increase in the e-commerce space and jobs related to that space. I mean, in 1 month alone, we saw more growth than the whole year has seen in e-com. Gaming platforms are growing. Online education is relooking at how they do work. And so while you're not going to see the stereotypical seasonality, there's definitely some industries that are moving much more differently than they would have normally. That is really being driven by the adaptation that we're all making in this world right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about pivoting. We see it with companies, with individuals, and adapting to where we are. Irina, thank you so much. Have a good weekend. Irina Novoselsky, Chief Executive Officer at CareerBuilder, joining us on the phone from New York City. Pivot. It's the word, Jason, I feel
It
like.
absolutely is.